Hey there guys, it's a quick whiz through how we do a desktop study, roughly how it works. It's an extremely rough guide, but hopefully it'll be useful to someone. So a desktop study, or a contaminated land desktop study, because you can get them for ecology or archaeology or heritage, but it's a review of paper-based, or nowadays electronic readily available information, sometimes combined with a quick site visit to have a look about, and it's sometimes called a phase one assessment because it fits into the phases carry on, and you can have a phase two, which is the investigation where you dig holes, a phase three, which is remediation method statement, where you kind of show how you're going to deal with the contamination if there is any, and then phase four, which is where you check to see whether you've tidied up properly. So when we're doing the desktop study, we look at various data sources. So we'll buy in a data pack, which is a bunch of PDFs with mapping in and a big list of stuff, geospatially linked data to the site. And then we have historic maps, which are sort of the main bit really, and probably the most interesting. If stuff's been going on the site quite recently, we can use Google Earth, use the historic function on there to have a look what's been going on. And then also, if there's a few loose ends, we can look in planning records. Something which used to be quite popular were the Kelly directories, which were like a historic bunch of directories. So if you've got something labelled on your site, works or something like that, you could look up the address in the Kelly directory and it will tell you what went on there. Might have been bicycle wheel manufacturer or something like that. So we'll run through a few examples now of what you might find, and hopefully we can get that wrapped up in the next 3 minutes. So this is a site which we looked at, and as you can see, there's this strange open empty linear feature here just to the north of this row of terraced houses. And but when we look back through the historic maps, we found there used to be a railway cutting there, and as you can see, going back to the more modern maps, it's not there anymore. So obviously that means that that cutting has been filled in, and in the records that we get in the PDF documents and things, it will say who ran the landfill and that kind of thing, but quite often all the records have been lost in one way or another. So the kind of situation you have there is you used to have a hole in the ground. You've got a house here, or want to build one, and in here you've got some stuff and you don't know what it is. So what could happen here is, if there's lots of wood and methane producing material in there, paper and stuff like that, then you could have gas being produced by that, and it will maybe find its way into your house, which is bad news obviously from explosions point of view. So that's something to look out for there. So any infilling around your site is probably not a great feature to have. The good news is that if it's been there for a good couple of 100 years, or 150 years or so, which goes back to some of the earliest maps, then chances are, the gassing phase is probably greatly reduced, and also depending on the geology as well. So really it only flows like this when you've got a fissure in clay or rock or something. If you've got loads of gravel in here, probably it will just come out through the gravels at the sides, perhaps. So that's a positive thing. But anyway, the way we would go on from there is we would sink a borehole just here, thusly, and we would monitor that for a few months with a special machine, and then we find out whether you've got likelihood of methane coming towards your house. So let's look at another example before we run out of time, and we'll have to interrupt this one. I'll look at this second example, which is a different kind of situation, and we were looking at this site here, and when we flicked through the various maps, then the next one is the site here again, and there was it's labelled works, which is another way of saying factory or something like that. So there could have been something going on there which wasn't great for ground quality. So we recommended some further work on that one. So we'll just run through why it's bad to have factory on your site. Say we're looking at a section here, and here is a factory doing whatever. It's got a chimney, perhaps, and or a stack as they call them, and you could have smoke coming out of here, and the particulates fall down on the ground. So that's one way that you can get contamination. You can have stuff going on inside the factory, and that contaminates the ground underneath it. You could have, in more modern factories where they used liquid fuels, you can have absolutely huge fuel tanks, and these rupture and crack, and the oil can go in the ground. So when you're building a new thing on there, all this is in the ground. Children can be playing in the soils, things like that. They get it. They can get it on their skin. You can ingest it if you're growing cabbages and whatnot on there, or root vegetables such as carrots, and so you eat those, and that's some of the roots which are considered when we're thinking about risk from low soil quality. So down below the ground, you've got at some point you've got the water table, and these oils quite often percolate down, and as you know, if you've ever made a salad dressing, the oil will float on top of the water. And so even though the tank might be, by example, even though the tank might be on one side of the site, on a large site, you could find that although there's no contamination with oil at the ground surface, you could have vapour troubles over the other side of the site because it's migrated along the water table. So if you were to build your house here, for example, then you might have hydrocarbon vapour troubles in this area of the site. So there's lots of things to think about, and it's a bit of a doom and gloom kind of exercise because we're always assuming worst case scenario. For example, if there were some tanks on site, then we'll probably presume they have leaked because that's what we're trying to do, guess whether the site might be contaminated. We'll have to try and guess whether there might have been particulates falling on over areas adjacent to the factory, and unless you've got evidence to suggest otherwise, like a past investigation, then again you have to go with worst case, and the same with vapours. So there's other things which you might consider, but that's the general consensus anyway. So I hope that's been slightly useful. Like I say, and it's an extremely rough guide, but if you're new to the subject, then hopefully you'll find it useful. Thanks very much for watching, and give us a ring with any questions, please.